So I think it's now time to start. Are you happy that we are starting now?
Yes, we can start anytime.
Yeah, we're starting on time, right? It's now 9 p.m. As scheduled. First of all, thank you so much for attending our webinar today. My name is Hong Trinh. I'm currently a doctoral researcher in sustainable debt market and sustainable finance infrastructure from Massey University in New Zealand. Today, I'm very pleased to host our webinar 3 today, organized by Finance Banking Network, AVSE Global. So I would like to introduce our speaker today, Dr. Farhad Taghizadeh-Hesary. Dr. Farhad is an associate professor of economics and finance at Tokai University and a visiting professor at Keio University in Tokyo, Japan. In addition, he is the vice president and co-founder of the International Society for Energy Transition Study based in Australia. Presently, he's also a visiting professor at Chiang Mai University, Thailand, and a distinguished research fellow at the University of Economics, Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. Dr. Farhad is a grantee of the Excellent Young Researcher, started from Ministry of Education of Japan. He was a visiting scholar, visiting professor, and visiting fellow at several institutions and universities, such as the Institute of Energy Economics of Japan, the University of Tokyo, Japan, and Griffith University, Australia. Dr. Farhad Taghizadeh-Hesary has published a wide range of topics, including energy economics, energy policy, green finance, small and medium-sized enterprise finance, monetary policy, banking, Asian and Japanese economy. Currently, he's serving as associate editor of several scientific journals, including Singapore Economic Review, Frontier in Energy Research, Global Finance Journal, Energy Efficiency, China Finance Review International, Journal of Business Perspective Energies, and the editor of Conscience, Business and Management. Dr. Farhad is also has guest edited special issue for several scientific journals, including Energy Policy, Energy Economics, Resource Policy, Finance Research Letter, Economic Analysis and Policy, Journal of Environmental Management, Economic Change and Structuring, and Climate Change Economics. So his research credit include authoring more than 200 academic journal paper and book chapter, editing 15 books published by Springer Nature, Rolex, World Scientific, and the Asian Development Bank Institute. Dr. Taghizadeh-Hesary led, managed, and has been involved in dozens of research, capacity building, and training, as well as consulting projects on energy economics, financial related topic for international organization and financial institution, government of various countries. He's hold a PhD in economics from Keio University with a scholarship from government of Japan. Very brilliant achievement, and we're pleased to have you today for the topic. The topic today is green finance for energy transition and green role in the post-pandemic. So, Dr. Farhad, please start your presentation.
Thank you very much, Hai, for your kind introduction. Hello, everyone. Good evening from Tokyo. It's a pleasure to have this webinar today, hosted by AVSE Global. So today's webinar is on green finance for energy transition and green growth, especially by focusing on the post-pandemic era. So this is an outline of my presentation. So first, the introduction, I will introduce and I will talk a little bit about the importance of this topic. Then I will explain about the challenges, the main challenges for the development of green energy projects, then role of institutional investors and long-term investment. Then I will propose a solution, which is so-called a spillover effect for increasing the rate of return of energy projects. Next is the role of community-based funds for financing smaller scale energy projects, and the role of green credit guarantee scheme, and finally the conclusion and policy recommendation. So first, the introduction. Unfortunately, one of the most disappointing aspects of the contemporary global economy is the low rate of investment in sustainable projects. So both in 2017, 2018, the new investment in renewable energy projects and energy efficiency declined. So in 2019, renewable energy investment increased a small increase. However, new investment in energy efficiency declined. In 2020, in the wake of COVID-19, due to the uncertainty about in the global economy and due to economic recession in all over the world, almost in all over the world, new investment in renewable energy projects and energy efficiency declined. So this is endangering the agreements, the Paris Agreement on climate change, and also several SDGs, several sustainable development goals. So this means that in the post-COVID-19 and in the current time that many economies are gradually opening and gradually introducing the recovery plans, role of green finance needs to be highlighted. Because nowadays, most countries, most governments are mainly focusing on boosting the economic growth, and they don't have any specific plan for greening their growth in the post-COVID-19 and in the recovery stages. So because economic growth, job creation, and recovery are considering as more important priorities for majority of the government in most countries. So this means in the post-COVID-19, in order to fill the current insufficient investment level in the green sector, imperative policy reforms are required, including global or regional carbon taxation, national or regional rules, regulation, and strategies on green financing, supportive policies for facilitating the issuance of green bonds, establishment of green credit rating to measure the greenness of the project, targeting energy subsidies, reducing the direct and indirect subsidies to fossil fuels, and introducing public de-risking tools such as green credit guarantee for reducing the risk of green investment. So this is a book that we edited, jointly with Professor Jeffrey Sachs, Professor Wintai Wu, and Professor Yoshino. We try to bring scholars in this area and on green finance, and the book published, and it's a reference book by Springer, which is available if you are interested. So it has chapters on 30 chapters on different green finance to increase the knowledge. Or the challenges. We all know the aim of reducing the reliance on renewable energy projects. We know that fossil fuels emissions are one of the major causes of climate change and global warming. But why still we are relying on fossil fuels, and what are the main challenges and main barriers? So main challenges from my point of view are provided here. So first of all, lack of long-term financing. So green projects are considering as a kind of infrastructural project, green infrastructural project that required long-term financing, not short to medium term. Still, there are various risks associated with these types of projects. And the rate of return of these projects is mainly lower in average when comparing to fossil fuel projects. And fourth obstacle or challenge is lack of capacity in the market actors. So this is also an issue. First of all, as I mentioned, lack of long-term financing, especially when we are looking at the Asian financial system. Majority of the Asian financial system are still dominated by banks, and bank loans or bank deposits are shaping the major parts of financial system in most Asian economies. So not only in Asia, but in many other parts of the developing world, majority of the financial system is made by bank loans. And share of other types of financial institutions, including pension funds, insurance companies, is smaller when comparing to banks. So bank resources are mainly coming from deposits, and deposits are short to medium term, 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. So it means these are suitable for funding short to medium term projects, not for financing long-term projects, because otherwise it would be maturity mismatch. So this means bank resources are not very suitable for financing infrastructural projects, including green infrastructure. Still, there are various risks associated with these projects, including technology risk. Many of technologies that we have in the green sector, green technologies, are still in their earlier stages when comparing to fossil fuel technologies that many of them back to almost 100 years ago. So because of that, these are more expensive and feasibilities matter. In addition to that, many of green technologies, these are results of a regional or international supply chain. So exchange rates matter. And many countries, especially in the developing world, for developing their green projects are relying on foreign finance. So this is creating other type of risk, debt risk or exchange rate risk for paying these debts in the future for these economies. And there are also conventional risks, including political risk, operational risk, demand risk, maintenance risk, earthquake and natural disaster on the green infrastructure. So I've mentioned that many of the green technologies are a result of a cross-country supply chain, and it's heavily depending on trade. Therefore, exchange rates matter. For example, here we looked at these 4 technologies: wind turbines, LED package, lithium cell, and photovoltaic modules. You see, and the numbers on the below of these technologies is showing the trade balance of each of these countries. So China has positive trade balance for wind turbine, but China has negative trade balance for LED package. And also, or for example, Germany has positive for the wind turbine, but negative for LED package, or negative for lithium cell, or and also for photovoltaic module. So this means exchange rate is matter. And as I've mentioned, rate of return is important. So green technologies, as I've mentioned, are often earlier in the development and not always commercially viable. So this is making green technologies more expensive and riskier ventures. Another reason that make the competition between green technologies and fossil fuel technologies unfair is because of majority of the supportive policies are toward fossil fuel projects. So according to a study by OECD, just among OECD member countries, there are almost 800 different individual policies for supporting fossil fuel projects. Another type of subsidy, which is an indirect one, is that fossil fuel projects are not or fossil fuel companies are not taxed efficiently. So this is creating a unfair situation and the unfair competition between these. So another challenge is lack of capacity in the market actors. Still many investors, many government agencies, they don't have enough information and knowledge that what is green finance, what is green investment, what is green infrastructure, how to measure the greenness of the projects. And lack of familiarity, limited information and knowledge, limited expertise on green infrastructure among investors are making obstacles for the development of this sector. For example, OECD study that just among OECD member countries, about $50 billion investment is required just for the capacity building. And the green infrastructure investment performance data is also scarce and needs to be collected systematically. And each country or in each region or internationally, we need to have database on green projects. So green data are really scarce. And okay, up to now, I talked about the importance of this topic and why we need to open a new file for green finance, and we shouldn't mix it with conventional finance, and we shouldn't just focus on, and we shouldn't only count on conventional finance. And from now on, I'm going to talk about the solutions. So I mentioned that banks are not very suitable for funding infrastructural projects because of the maturity mismatch. But on the other hand, institutional investors would be very suitable because institutional investors, including insurance companies, pension funds, these are holding long-term money. These are institutions that hold 10 years money, 20 years money, 30 years money. Therefore, these are very suitable for funding infrastructural projects, which are long-term projects. And but unfortunately, institutional investors in OECD member countries are holding $100 trillion asset under management, but less than 1% of this huge asset is allocated to infrastructure financing, and just a small portion of this 1% is allocated to green infrastructure. So it means governments need to incentivize these projects for bringing their asset so that the institutional investors bring their asset. Another solution is a spillover effect that I will introduce it. I mentioned that earlier, that why investors are not, I raised this question, that why many investors are still not interested to invest in green projects. And the reason is that, the reason that the goals, we couldn't achieve the goal is that because many governments, they don't put themselves in a place of investors. So we need to see from the investor's perspective. From the investor's perspective, rate of return and risk are important, only these two. So environment is coming in the next priority from the point of view of many investors. So it means if we want to set a policy, a supportive policy, if this policy can help to increase the rate of return and reduce the risk, so it means automatically investors will come to this sector. We don't need to set a rule, force them to that you have to invest a portion of your portfolio in the green sector and so on. So it means we need to see from the investor's perspective. And for example, in the energy sector, in the power sector, in most of the countries, electricity tariffs are regulated by the governments. And governments in most countries, in order to maximize the social welfare, usually set the electricity tariff at low rates. So this is one of the reasons that energy projects, electricity projects are not very interesting for private sector for investment. So, but here I'm proposing a solution that in order to increase the investment incentive, in order to incentivize the energy projects, power project for the private sector, if we can introduce the spillover effect and if we can return this spillover to private sector, that would be a good incentive for them. But what does the spillover effect mean, and how can we utilize it for bringing the for incentivizing the private investment? Imagine that there is a region which was unelectrified before. A region in a country, this region was unelectrified before, then government has a plan for bringing private investment into this region and for establishing renewable energy projects such as this hydro project, generating electricity, transmitting electricity through this region. Then when we have electricity in this region, then gradually the output of the region will increase. More businesses will be created, will be emerged in that region. And the output of the region will increase, price of land will increase, property price will increase. This is called a spillover effect. This is a spillover effect of power supply. And then gradually, because of this spillover effect, then governments can collect more taxes from this region, can collect more taxes. This is called a spillover tax. This is called a spillover tax. And what we propose is that if governments, before establishment of this project, measure the spillover effect and then announce it to the private sector that if you as a private sector come and invest into this project, then after, for example, 2 years, 3 years, I will return this portion of the spillover tax to you. That can increase the rate of return of this project. So this means that then the investor won't just rely on electricity tariff as the only source of income. And this spillover effect, spillover tax refund, would increase the rate of return of the project and would be a good incentive for the private sector. This is important. Why? Because it doesn't rely on, I mean, this solution is not relying on government's money, on government's budget. So when we are talking about policies that can support the renewable energy sector, green sector, many people just mentioned that governments should give subsidy. But governments in different countries have lots of fiscal issues, especially during the COVID-19 because of the high expenses that governments have on healthcare, transfer payments, and recovery plans. So there is no budget for allocating to this sector. So it means a solution is workable if it is financially sustainable and not relying on government's money. So this is coming from the future revenues which are generated due to this electricity. So if you are interested to read more about the model behind this, the theoretical background, and how it's possible to do that, so we have this paper that if you are interested. And as I've mentioned, currently in most of the projects, I mean, power energy projects, the only source of income is the user charge or the tariffs that the investor is collecting. But by introducing a spillover effect, and if governments collect these taxes from those regions that become electrified and returning a portion of it to the private sector, rate of return of the project will increase. As I've mentioned earlier, one of the major barriers for development of renewable energy project is low rate of return. However, by this, we can increase the rate of return and we can make the project more interesting. So a spillover effect or institutional investors that I have introduced are mainly workable for larger scale projects that can have significant impact, economic impact to a region. But we shouldn't neglect the small and medium-sized energy projects. These are also very important, especially for rural areas, especially for remote areas and off-grid projects. So for this issue, I'm proposing a community-based solution, community-based financing solution, which is called hometown investment trust funds. Let me introduce that. What are hometown investment trust funds and how these can help to fill the finance gap, green finance gap of a small energy project. So you are familiar with Fukushima nuclear disaster that happened in March 2011 in Japan due to the earthquake and tsunami in Japan that hit the coast of Sendai. After that, due to lack of safety nets, Japanese government shut down almost all nuclear power plants, and the nuclear power generation in Japan became almost zero. So Japan substituted this nuclear loss with importing more fossil fuels and also increasing the share of renewable energy. However, for the people who were living in that region, they said we don't want to have nuclear power because of safety matters. On the other hand, coal is also harmful for health due to the pollution. So they like to have a more sustainable source of energy, solar, wind, but these projects are considered as risky projects from the point of view of many investors, from the point of view of banks, and banks are reluctant to finance these projects. And this was when these types of financial innovations created in that region. People started to collect small amount of money, and then they made a fund, which was a project-oriented fund, and using the resources of that fund, they could establish projects, solar project, wind project, generate electricity, using the electricity that they generated, and also selling the excess of it to the national power company. So this type of financial innovations and became familiar and became famous in Japan as hometown investment trust funds or HIT funds. So if you want to read more about hometown investment trust funds, so this book is available, and this working paper, Asian Development Bank Institute working paper, is also available for free. You can just Google it, hometown investment trust fund and analysis of credit risk, and you can download this paper if you are interested. So as I've mentioned, bank resources should be allocated to safe projects because of rules and regulation, because of financial rules, financial regulation, because of Basel Capital Accord. Banks are not allowed to allocate their resources to risky projects, and they have to allocate it to safe projects. On the other hand, solutions such as this community-based solution or hometown investment trust fund is suitable for matching the resources of investors to renewable projects, especially small-scale projects, and especially in rural areas. So this is how this figure is showing how this scheme is working. Small investors, are bringing small amount of, investors are bringing a small amount of money, $100, $200, $300, majorly through internet. These people could be from that hometown, or could be from other part of the country, or even from other part of the world. They can see these projects and buy some units of investment and invest. So these kinds of funds are project oriented. Then as a result of it, establishing this solar or wind project, and also the investors can use the product or services out of this project, and also selling the excess of it to the national power company and making some profit. Governments also can bring some money as a seed money For example, governments can collect carbon taxes from polluting industries and allocating to these funds in a form of seed money. Then when the project became feasible, then in the next stage, banks also can come with their senior loans. So maybe you mentioned that hometown investment trust funds are exactly same as conventional crowdfunding. What is the differences between hometown investment trust funds and crowdfunding? So there are two major differences between HIT funds and conventional crowdfunding. When we are talking about venture capital, when we are talking about crowdfunding, the only reason which is behind this investment is profit making, not any other reason. However, there is a differences between these two types of funds. For the people who were living in Fukushima and then they established these funds, they were not looking for profit, but they were looking for a solution which is sustainable. They wish to generate electricity from sustainable resources. And I always mention that there is a warm feeling behind the hometown investment trust funds, and investors are sympathizing with the company, with the project owners, and they are not solely seeking the profit. Although if the project can make profit, so they are happier that they did something for the region, and at the same time they could make some profit. So hundreds of these funds has been established in Japan after Fukushima nuclear disaster. For example, this company, it's called Music Security, through establishment of 40 funds, could raise about almost 1 billion Japanese yen for the construction of these solar rooftops. Or another company in Nagano Prefecture of Japan, 47 people participated and they could establish funds and collect enough money for this solar rooftop. Or 249 people participated and they collected $2 million for establishment of this wind power generator. Then after that, when the government found out that these types of solution is very interesting and it could be introduced to other sectors, to other risky sectors that they cannot get finance or they cannot get funding from the conventional institutions, from financial institutions, other types of financial institutions such as banks and so on, then this became a national strategy. Hometown investment trust funds became a national strategy in Japan and followed under the direction of the former Prime Minister of Japan. So in Japan, the supervision and the regulating of the whole financial system is by FSA, a financial services agency. So financial services agency, through an act which is called Supervision and Regulating Based on Financial Instrument and Exchange Act, gave license to companies called type 2 financial instrument business. So these companies are acting as an intermediate company. Imagine, for example, you want to establish a project, solar project, you need $1 million, and then you approach these intermediate companies that they are licensed by FSA, they got license from FSA. Then this intermediate company assess your risk, check your background, whether you are eligible to run this project, you have enough knowledge, what is your business plan, what is your business model, what's the feasibility of this project, and so on. If everything approved, then $1 million, and each unit, for example, can be $100, then 10,000 units. And then introducing these case of investment on the intermediate company's website or through the applications. It can be app, it can be on the website, and then investors from that region, from different parts of the country, from all over the world. For example, Vietnamese who are in US, Vietnamese who are in Europe, they can see a project which is in Hanoi, in Ho Chi Minh, or in other parts of Vietnam, and they like that region because it's their hometown. They want to do something for their region. At the same time, if it can make profit, they are happier. And then through this system, it is very clear and all informations are available there. So this transparency is reducing the risk because everything is clear, everything is transparent. On the other hand, another thing that raised the confidence of the investors is the role of this intermediate company, because this intermediate company is licensed by the government and it is acting as assessor of the project. It doesn't mean that this intermediate company is posting and introducing all projects. No, this intermediate company is acting as an assessor and is only selecting those projects which have higher probability of success. So this means role of this intermediate company or role of assessor is very important. So one of these intermediate companies, I know the CEO of it, and I asked him that, so you are matchmaking, doing a matchmaking between investors and these renewable projects, and these are risky ventures, so your default ratio should be very high. What is your default ratio, default of this project? He said less than 1%. So this is very good for venture capital. And so it means role of intermediate company is very important for selecting only those projects that have higher probability. Then these percentage of success could be announced on the company website. And then when investors approach to this website and see that from the bunch of projects that these intermediate company is advertising, just less than 1% of them failed. So I have a higher confidence to bring money and invest into these kinds of projects. So thanks to these innovations, so many projects established throughout of Japan. So next solution is, spillover effect that I've introduced can help to increase the rate of return. Hometown investment trust funds can bring risky capital. Another barrier that I've mentioned, which is existing for renewable energy project, is high risk. And among these different types of risk, credit risk is really matter. So if we introduce a solution that can increase the rate of return and reduce the risk, it means automatically private sector will show interest for entering to it. So the solution that I'm proposing introducing is establishment of green credit guarantee scheme. So you're familiar with credit guarantee corporation. So credit guarantee corporations are available in different countries, and these are their mission is mainly for helping to fill the finance gap in those sectors that the the project owner cannot normally get finance from the market. Credit Guarantee Corporation, and the main scope of work is for small and medium-sized enterprises, SMEs. So in Japan, in Korea, in Vietnam, in Philippines, Indonesia, also in Europe, also in the US, credit guarantee corporations are existing. So what I propose is to use the same scheme for green sector, or establishing a new type of credit guarantee corporations. It's called green credit guarantee corporation, because for the green projects, their nature is so much similar to SMEs. So there is asymmetry of information that in the SME sector, the same thing is existing between lenders and SMEs. SMEs have lack of collateral, lack of guarantee for borrowing from banks. Green projects are also have, mainly they have lack of collateral. But both of them are important for the economy. SMEs are important for job creation, for economic output, and so on. Green projects are also important for sustainability purposes and so on. So this means when green project owners approach to banks for borrowing money, for getting loans because of asymmetry of information, because of lack of collateral, and because of the risk which is existing. In majority of the cases, the loan application is rejected. This is when the green credit guarantee cooperation come into the middle. The green project owner approach to green credit guarantee cooperation. Then the green credit guarantee cooperation assess the risk of the green project. Depending on the level of the risk, then green project owner needs to pay a fee, which is called premium, guarantee premium. If the risk is high, then the project needs to pay higher premium rate. If the risk is low, needs to pay lower premium rate. After that, credit guarantee cooperation provide guarantee. Then after that, green project owner approach to bank, and bank sees that about 80% or 70% of the loan is guaranteed by the government, then bank will show more interest, more eagerness for lending to this sector. So if you are interested in credit guarantee scheme, this paper is available. And establishment of green credit guarantee cooperation can shift the loan supply curve to the green sector to right. So currently, the loan supply curve to green sector is more backward bending. So it means interest rate is increasing, and it means interest rate is increasing, but the loan amount does not increase. So by establishment of this scheme, it's possible to reduce the interest rate because risk is reducing the lending rate to them. So this means risk could be covered, lending rate to these sectors would be lower. That can increase the rate of return of these projects because the capital cost is reducing. So about Japan, as I've mentioned, there are, for the case of Japan, credit guarantee corporations first time started from Japan in 1930s, in 1937. So the first credit guarantee corporation started from Japan, and now there are 57 credit guarantee corporations in Japan. So there is one credit guarantee corporation in each province. And but as I've mentioned, these credit guarantee corporations are only providing services to SMEs, not to green sector. So this is what I'm proposing along with my co-authors for using same scheme for green sector. But in order to have if we want to have a proper solution, this solution, the credit guarantee corporations needs to be optimal, or credit guarantee scheme needs to be optimal. What does it mean? What is optimal credit guarantee scheme? The optimal credit guarantee scheme is a scheme which is not so much relying on government money. This is the first thing. Second thing, it is possible to use this scheme for reducing the capital risk and the credit risk and increasing the lending to green sector. So in that case, we can call it an optimal scheme. In order to achieve the optimal credit guarantee scheme, so we need to consider both sides of this scheme. In the left-hand side, we have borrowers. Borrowers borrowers which are low carbon projects. For receiving guarantee, they need to pay some fee, premium. So this fee needs to be varied depending on the risk of the borrower. So adopting same fee for all borrowers regardless of their credit worthiness would be that this fee needs to vary depending on the macroeconomic situation. When we are in a boom or when we are in a recession, this fee needs to vary. When we are in a recession, like in the current time, in the wake of COVID-19 or in the post-COVID-19, the fee needs to be lessened because these projects have difficulties in accessing to finance. If we charge them a high fee, this means this is another burden for them that they cannot survive. So the fee needs to be reduced. On the other hand, optimal credit guarantee ratio. What does it mean? This is the bank side, because ultimately banks are benefiting from this scheme. Banks are benefiting from this scheme because if they lend to green sector and in case of default, government will compensate, government will pay about 80% of their lending to green sector. But for the case of banks also, the ratio of guarantee needs to be varied. So it means government shouldn't provide same guarantee ratio to all banks, regardless of their healthiness, regardless of their soundness. Sound banks need to receive a higher guarantee ratio. Risky banks need to receive lower guarantee ratio. Otherwise, would be moral hazard, and it wouldn't be an incentive for unsound banks to enhance their credit worthiness. This is an important point. Second thing is that this ratio also needs to be function of macroeconomic situation. When we are in a recession like the current time, guarantee ratio needs to be increased so that banks easier, lend to the green sector easier. This can help for having a green growth in the post-COVID-19, because now we are talking about how to greening the growth, how to greening the recovery plans in the post-COVID-19. So through guarantee system, it is possible, and by increasing the guarantee ratio. And this paper is available if you like to read more about model, theoretical background, and the empirical work. So we used the data of about 1,300 projects, small projects, and we calculated the guarantee fee and also guarantee ratio. And the credit guarantee cooperation, credit guarantee scheme, and greening it, green credit guarantee scheme, first time we introduced it in 2019 in this paper. And I'm glad that now I see that many international organizations are using this phrase, green credit guarantee scheme. So about a few days ago, I had a presentation in a workshop, and I've seen that multilateral development banks, for example, AIIB, Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank officer also mentioned that AIIB has planned from next year for introducing green credit guarantee program, or also ADB. I hear that they have same plan. So it's a pleasure to see that this idea and this research could help to use this. And let me conclude my presentation and also provide some policy recommendations. So especially to developing countries, Vietnam and other developing countries. So too much reliance on overseas finance will create a future burden for the country. So too much creation of external debt will lead to very risky situation, especially for developing economies. Circulating domestic saving to domestic investment and maximizing the non-debt financing, such as FDI or remittance, are key. Lack of long-term financing, existence of various risks, low rate of return, and lack of capacity in the market actors are the major challenges for the development of green projects. Institutional investors such as insurance companies, pension funds are potential long-term investors in green projects. Utilizing tax revenue by the use of a spillover effect of energy projects will investors. For financing smaller scale renewable energy projects using micro investment schemes such as hometown investment trust funds, village funds could be an appropriate choice. The green credit guarantee scheme will reduce the asymmetry of information and reduce the expected default losses, therefore will cover a part of risk and will unlock the private investment and financial institutions lending to low carbon projects. In order to prevent moral hazard, guarantee ratio of green credit guarantee corporation needs to be variable and depending on the credit worthiness of borrowers and financial institution and not fixed. And these are the summary of the tools that I have mentioned in this work, this presentation, and these are the references, and thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Dr. Farhad, for your very interesting and informative presentation. And this presentation particularly timely, especially due to the post-COVID pandemic. And we have a couple of questions from the audience. Let's please open the chat. Jesse, he's asking that a multinational organization that give funds and finance to different energy projects globally really to adopt the spillover effect idea.
So let me read it again.